A narcissist walks into a room, and before you even realize it, the air shifts. It's subtle at first. They command attention, not always in an obvious way, but in a way that makes it clear they believe they are the most important person there. You see, narcissists operate on a different wavelength than the rest of us. They're not just confident. Confidence is grounded, it's steady. Narcissism, on the other hand, is brittle, it's fragile. And when you get too close to that fragile core, you'll see just how quickly it cracks. The thing about narcissists is that they have one central need: control. They need to control how they are seen, how they are perceived, how others respond to them. Every interaction is a stage, and they are the lead actor, the director, and the critic all rolled into one. They carefully curate their image, and they're always watching to make sure the audience, meaning you, me, everyone, plays their part correctly. If you challenge that script, even in the smallest way, they don't just get uncomfortable, they get defensive, they get reactive, they get mean. At their core, narcissists have a deep, unshakable fear. And it's this fear that drives everything they do. They are terrified of being exposed, not for some dark secret, not for something they've done, but for who they truly are underneath the performance. Because if you strip away the charm, the arrogance, the grandiosity, what's left? It's not strength, it's not security, it's emptiness. And that's the thing they will do anything, absolutely anything, to avoid confronting. Now, if you've ever dealt with a narcissist, you know what happens when you try to hold them accountable. It's like trying to hold on to smoke. They dodge, they deflect, they twist your words until suddenly you're the problem. You bring up something they did that hurt you, and instead of listening, they turn it around. You're too sensitive. You always overreact. That never happened. Sound familiar? It's gaslighting at its finest, and it's designed to make you question your own reality. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because while narcissists are skilled at dodging accountability, there is one thing they can't fake: true empathy. They might put on a show of caring when it benefits them, but real, deep, genuine empathy, that's beyond their reach. Not because they don't want to feel it, but because they can't. Empathy requires self-awareness. It requires the ability to step outside of yourself, to see someone else's pain and sit with it without making it about you. And for a narcissist, that's like standing on the edge of a cliff with no guardrails. It's terrifying. So when you ask them a question that forces them to engage with empathy, when you ask them, how would you feel if someone did that to you? What you're really doing is holding up a mirror. And they hate mirrors. Because a mirror means reflection. A mirror means accountability. A mirror means facing something they've spent their entire lives running from. And in that moment, they have two choices: either acknowledge the truth, which they won't, or scramble to maintain control. And that's when you'll see the mask slip. That's when you'll get your answer without them ever saying a word. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Words have power, not just in what they say, but in what they reveal. A single question asked at the right moment can shift the entire dynamic of a conversation. It can peel back the layers of someone's personality and show you in real time exactly who they are. And when it comes to narcissists, asking the right question isn't just a tool, it's a flashlight in the dark. Because they spend so much energy crafting an image, curating the perfect response, making sure they're in control of the narrative. But the right question, it catches them off guard. It forces them into a space where they can't manipulate their way out without exposing themselves in the process. That's the thing about narcissists. They are masterful at controlling conversations. They know how to steer things in their favor, how to deflect, how to gaslight, how to make you question what you saw, what you felt, what you know to be true. They don't just want to be right, they need to be right. And more importantly, they need you to believe they're right. Because the second you stop playing along, the second you stop feeding into their carefully crafted version of reality, the whole thing starts to fall apart. That's why they get so defensive when challenged, not because they're strong, but because they're desperate to hold everything together. And this is where the power of one question comes in. Because instead of arguing with them, where they'll twist your words and turn the conversation into a battlefield, what if you took a different approach? What if instead of explaining yourself, instead of trying to get them to see what they've done, You simply asked a question that forced them to confront it. That's the power of the right question. It bypasses all the distractions, all the manipulations, and gets straight to the core of who they are. And once you do that, they have nowhere to hide. Now, here's what's fascinating. Most people, when asked a question that invites self-reflection, will take a moment, they'll pause, they'll think, they'll search for an honest answer, because that's what emotionally healthy people do. They don't see accountability as a threat. They see it as a chance to grow. But a narcissist, that pause, that reflection, it's not there. Instead, you'll see something else. You'll see defensiveness, deflection, a change in tone. You'll see them scramble to regain control, because this isn't how the conversation was supposed to go. You weren't supposed to make them think about their actions. You weren't supposed to turn the mirror back on them. And that moment, that tiny shift in energy, tells you everything you need to know. Because if someone can't even sit with the idea of being held accountable, if their first instinct is to dodge, attack, or turn it back on you, then that's all the clarity you need. It tells you exactly who you're dealing with. No arguments, no long explanations, just one question and their response. That's your answer. There's a moment, just a split second, when you ask the right question and everything shifts. It's subtle, but if you pay attention, you'll see it. A flicker in their expression, a pause that wasn't supposed to be there, a slight change in their voice. Because when you ask a narcissist, how would you feel if someone did that to you? You're not just asking a question. You're forcing them into a space they don't know how to navigate. You're handing them a mirror they never wanted to hold. And in that moment, they have a choice. Answer honestly and risk exposure, or deflect and reveal exactly what they're trying to hide. Now, to most people, this is a simple question, something we ask all the time without even thinking about it. Because at its core, it's an empathy check. It's a way to say, put yourself in my shoes, feel what I feel, see what I see. And for someone who is emotionally healthy, it's an easy answer. Even if they've done something wrong, even if they've hurt someone, they can take a step back and say, yeah, I wouldn't like that either. That's what empathy does. It allows us to connect, to understand, to grow. But for a narcissist, this question is like throwing a wrench into a machine that's been running perfectly, at least in their mind, because for them, relationships aren't about connection. They're about control. They don't do self-reflection. They don't do accountability. And most of all, they don't do empathy, because empathy would require them to acknowledge something they've spent their entire lives avoiding, that their actions affect other people. So what happens when you ask them, how would you feel if someone did that to you? At first, maybe nothing. Maybe they smirk. Maybe they laugh it off. Maybe they act like the question itself is ridiculous. But if you watch closely, you'll see it, the slight discomfort, the micro expressions that flash across their face before they mask it again. Because you've done something they weren't expecting. You've put them in a position where they have to address their own behavior. And that is not a place they want to be. Now, their response will tell you everything you need to know. Some will dodge the question completely. They'll say something vague like, that's not the point, or you always do this. Others will get defensive, turn it back on you. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Or they'll twist it entirely. You're just trying to start an argument. And then there are the ones who get angry, who lash out, who belittle, who try to make you regret even asking in the first place. But here's the thing. A person who truly values you, who cares about how their actions impact you, won't need to twist or dodge or attack. They'll answer, they'll take a moment, they'll reflect. Because that's what healthy people do. But a narcissist, they can't go there. They won't go there. And that's your answer. Right there in the space between the question and their reaction. You don't have to argue. You don't have to explain. Just ask the question and watch what happens next. That's all you need to see. When you ask a narcissist, how would you feel if someone did that to you? Something fascinating happens. It's like dropping a stone into still water and watching the ripples spread. Only with a narcissist, those ripples aren't calm or reflective. They're defensive, chaotic, and sometimes downright hostile, because that question does something they aren't prepared for. It forces them into a position where they have to confront the one thing they avoid at all costs: accountability. Now, most people, when faced with that kind of question, take a second, they think about it, they might realize, yeah, that would hurt me too, or I see what you mean. They may not like admitting it, but they get there, because empathy, even when it's uncomfortable, is a natural part of being human. But a narcissist, their response will be different. It has to be, because they can't let you see what's really behind the mask. And that's where their true colors start to show. One of the most common reactions you'll get is deflection. They'll change the subject, turn the conversation in another direction, or suddenly make it about something you did wrong. Maybe they'll bring up a mistake you made last year, or accuse you of being too sensitive. Why are you even asking me that? You're always making things about feelings. That's not an answer. It's a distraction, and it's intentional, because the moment they actually engage with the question, they risk exposing the truth. Then there's the outright denial. The ones who act as if the question itself doesn't even apply. That's completely different. I would never be in that situation. I don't even know what you're talking about. They dismiss the whole thing, not because they don't understand it, but because acknowledging it means facing something they'd rather pretend isn't real. The fact that they aren't as untouchable as they want you to believe. And then, of course, there's the anger, the lashing out, the need to reestablish control by making you feel small. Some narcissists will mock you for even asking, "Oh, so now you're a therapist? Wow, you really think you're so deep, huh?" Others will go straight for emotional warfare, guilt tripping, shaming, making you second guess whether you even had the right to ask in the first place. Because if they can make you feel bad for questioning them, they don't have to answer at all. But here's what's important to remember: the way they react is the answer. A person who is capable of empathy, of real emotional connection, doesn't need to deflect, deny, or destroy just to get out of an uncomfortable conversation. They can sit with the discomfort, they can reflect, even if it's hard. But a narcissist, they will do anything to avoid that moment of truth. And that tells you everything you need to know. You don't have to push. You don't have to explain. Just watch how they handle that one simple question, because in their reaction, they'll tell you exactly who they are. The reason this one question works isn't just because of what it asks, it's because of what it forces. How would you feel if someone did that to you? Sounds simple, almost too simple, but the power of it is in what it demands: self-reflection, emotional awareness, and most importantly, empathy. And for a narcissist, that's where the wheels start to come off, because this isn't a question they can answer honestly without exposing something they don't want you to see. Narcissists operate in a world where everything revolves around them, their needs, their wants, their version of events. They rewrite reality in a way that protects their ego at all costs. So when you ask them to imagine themselves on the receiving end of their own behavior, you're not just asking for an answer, you're asking them to step outside of themselves, to feel what you feel. And that is something they fundamentally cannot do. But that's why when you ask this question, they scramble. It forces them into a position they've spent years avoiding. Because if they were to answer honestly, if they were to say, yeah, that would hurt, then what comes next? Accountability, acknowledgement, a crack in the carefully constructed image that says, I'm always right, I'm always justified, I'm always in control. And they can't afford that crack, not even for a second. So they react the only way they know how. They dodge, they attack, they turn the question back on you, not because they don't understand it, but because understanding it would mean admitting something they can't afford to admit, that they were wrong, that they caused harm, that they aren't as superior, as untouchable as they want to believe. And so instead of answering, they shift the focus. That's not even relevant. Why are you making a big deal out of this? You're just looking for something to be upset about, anything to get the attention off of them. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you've ever watched someone lie and know they're lying, you've probably seen what happens when the truth is sitting right there in the room with them. It's in their body language, in the way their eyes move, in the way their voice shifts just slightly. because deep down at some level they know, and in that moment they are working overtime to make sure you don't see what they see. That's what this question does. It forces them into a moment of reckoning, even if they won't acknowledge it. Now, here's the real kicker. A healthy person, even one who has made mistakes, even one who has hurt people, will still be able to answer. Maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's humbling, but they'll go there because they can, because empathy exists within them even when it's hard. But a narcissist, they can't go there. And when they refuse, when they react instead of respond, they're telling you exactly what you need to know. You don't have to press them. You don't have to force the answer. Just watch what happens next. Because in their reaction, you will see the truth they are working so hard to hide. The moment a narcissist dodges the question, the moment they shift the blame, lash out, or make you second guess yourself, that's when you know. That's when you see it. Because at the heart of it all, their response isn't just about avoiding accountability. It's about maintaining control. The second they answer honestly, they lose control of the narrative. And a narcissist will do anything to make sure that never happens. So what do you do with that? What do you do when you ask a simple question? How would you feel if someone did that to you? And instead of an answer, you get a game, a diversion, a battle you never signed up for. The truth is, once you see it, once you recognize the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's where your real power comes in. Because the moment you realize they can't engage with empathy, the moment you understand what that means, you get to make a choice. You get to decide what happens next. For so long, people who deal with narcissists, whether it's in relationships, families, friendships, or workplaces, end up in this endless cycle of trying to be understood, trying to explain, trying to get the narcissist to see what they're doing, to acknowledge the impact of their words and actions. But here's the hard truth. You can't make someone see something they are committed to avoiding. You can't force someone to care in a way they aren't wired to care. And every time you try, every time you engage in that exhausting back and forth, they win. Because keeping you wrapped up in their web, keeping you confused, emotionally drained, and questioning yourself, that is the game. But the beauty of recognizing this pattern is that once you see it, you don't have to play anymore. You don't have to argue. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to beg for basic decency. You simply have to trust what you saw. That moment when they refused to answer, that moment when they deflected, minimized, or attacked instead of reflecting, that was your answer. And once you have it, you don't need anything else. That's where freedom starts, not in convincing them to change, but in giving yourself permission to stop expecting them to stop explaining, to stop justifying, to stop waiting for a moment of clarity that will never come, and instead to take what you know and decide, what do I want to do with this truth? Because you have a choice. You always have a choice. And when you see things clearly, when you stop hoping for a different outcome from someone who has shown you exactly who they are, that's when you take your power back. Not by changing them, but by refusing to let them change you.